Hello, this is Toby again from Toby's Urban Sketch, and today we're going to be practicing people and alpacas, as it turns out. So I guess people and animals, how can we sketch them? If you do enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe because it's a huge support, really appreciated for myself and my little channel. The reference today will appear up here, hopefully. And it is me and an alpaca from a few years ago. It was my girlfriend's birthday because she is mildly obsessed with alpacas. So we went to a little alpaca farm and essentially played with the alpacas, which was really good fun, to be fair. A note on sketching people. I don't know the exact law, but the idea that I try and work with is that it's not really fair to make someone feel uncomfortable by staring at them, or B, make money or whatever out of someone's likeness without their permission. So if I do sketch people, I normally don't stare. I get their essence, I use them for a shape and I fill in the gaps how I want. Or I use people I know who've given me permission, friends, family. On a very rare occasion I might ask someone if they don't mind being sketched, but as a social recluse I find that mortifying, so I rarely would do that. And that's why today's reference is a picture of me. So let's get on with how I sketch people. So often with people I do start with a pencil. The reason being there's a lot more curves and odd shapes in people than in buildings. And I tend to start with the head. And I don't try and make it a exact, it's not a portrait. Again, it's a sketch. So I just go for the shapes. A triangle, a bit of a receding hairline, as you can see, an ear. And then we can pop in lines where the eyebrows and eyes going to be. And just keep everything really gentle to start with. I do some portraits. I tend to do them with pastels because you can move the pastels around a lot more than watercolour, which doesn't really move. And what happens when we draw people is we often overemphasize the facial features. The facial features are very small, but we often make them really big and we shrink the forehead, the nose becomes huge, and everything becomes out of proportion. To prevent that with my line and washes, I start off really gentle. I start off with pencil often, although if I'm out and about I won't. I'll just sketch loosely in a pen and then go over with a bolder line. The other thing we tend to do is shrink the forehead irrespective of the size of things and put the eyes too high. The eyes are normally somewhere in the middle of the head, and then the ear needs to be sort of lined up with the right part of the eye because that affects where the head is tilting. And we need to be careful of the shape of the nose. I often find it's easy to draw something huge and pointy, whereas actually there's normally quite a subtle curve and things. That all just comes with, practice, and I'm still far from perfect at doing these, and I do them in a very sketchy style. The other thing just to be aware of is getting the proportion of the body, the head, and the legs about right. This is all affected by perspective, obviously, and how much foreshortening and things are going on. But if you're looking at someone flat on, we're about 7 heads, 6.5, 7.5 heads, and you just need to carefully measure that we're not making the legs too short, too long. Often people tend to draw the head too small, which is something which happens in, if you look at Greek statues, they have a small head, big body and legs. It's kind of a heroic type of build. Someone looks more athletic, like a superhero if they've got these huge legs and body. But for sketching, it's not important to be accurate. It's important just to enjoy it. So it's more about the experience. Hands are a nightmare, I'm sure you're all aware, or at least they are for me. So I tend to just do them really loosely. And I like it when people are holding things like I appear to be holding a phone, because that means I can cover up the hand. There you go. I think I've made myself a bit skinny. There we go. So that's enough of me. So how am I going to do this alpaca? So animals are shapes still. And it's easy to draw a dog which looks like a fox, or a cat which looks like a panda, and things like that, if you don't just focus on the shapes. Just because we're not, unless you do a lot of them, we're not used to just drawing the right shapes for them, the right sizes. We draw what we think we see rather than what we actually see. So with this alpaca, we've got a sort of rectangle with a nose here, and we've got a mouth going at that angle. Then we've got the jaw coming up, and if we follow the jaw up, we get to the ear with another little ear poking out. And then we've got something like a rectangle meets semicircle on top of their head, and then we've got a neck. The other thing I like doing is, like I do with buildings, making things a little more geometric and sketchy, because that gives us more leeway, I find anyway. And then I just have to have a look and just see, so the head ends here, and actually the back should start a little bit below there, so fourth time lucky. So I suppose the other reason I start with pencil for these is because with a building you can't instantly tell with your eye if something looks really weird, but with a human or a dog or something, you can instantly tell, looking at it, if it's just totally wrong. That's why I say a dog might look like a fox, because they have different shapes, and although we're not used to analysing those shapes, we're very well programmed for picking out when we're wrong, when something looks wrong or whatever. We have shortcuts in our neurology for picking out these shapes. With that in mind, so when in this image, I'm actually slightly rotated. My first sketch didn't have the glimmer of the eye. I had the forehead shape a bit wrong. Again, I'm just geometricalizing, if that's a word, all these shapes so that I can get it closer to real life, but in an easy and relaxed way. I think we're ready for the pen now. One last thing I might do is add in these. I like this line in the background, the gate, for context. Just got to be aware of the perspective of these gate posts. Don't know, they're not gate posts, but the gate lines. And we stick in the verticals as well. Just gives us a bit more understanding about what that is. And we can pop in a few flowers and a few lines, just showing that there's a texture, and then maybe pop in this distant fence as well. So that's a bit of context about we're in a field, there's a fence, another little fence in the background. Why not chuck in these trees as well? Because then we really understand, look, we're in the countryside, just with these little shapes. So next I'm going to go for a 0.3 Staedtler fine liner. I'm just experimenting with all my fine liners again, so I'll be using in my next few videos all sorts of different ones, different sizes, just to see if there's something that I prefer to my Winsor Newtons, which I didn't realise I preferred. I think very likely I'll be going back to my favourite Winsor Newtons though. I'm starting now on the body rather than the head. The reason I started the head with the pencil is because it sets the size of everything else. The reason I'm starting down here with the pen is because it's nerve-wracking to do the head. So I want to just get used to putting my pen lines in before I move on to that. I didn't draw in my second foot with the pencil, but it's much easier to do with all the context of everything else in there. So I'm pretty confident just adding it in. We also word of warning for doing sketches, common mistakes that I think everyone makes, or not everyone, I can't say everyone, but a lot of people make, is feet tend to get too big, particularly for shortened scene like this. They should be pretty small, but even in general we tend to make them a bit too big, so just be a little bit careful. Going to leave the hand because it interfaces with the alpaca, and just get the idea. There's a couple of collars in there, so a little bit of textural lines. And now the nerve-wracking bit. So we don't want to just follow our pencil lines because we can always improve on them. So just keep looking. Just keep checking your reference as you draw. So here I can see my ear should be further back. This hairline goes there. And then we've got the beard actually coming down quite a lot further forward than I had it. Now I'm going to get the eyebrow in, and then the other eyebrow. And really gentle with the nose. It doesn't need to even all be there. It can be very tempting to be like, yeah, we've got the nose, let's just draw a big line. And before you know it, you've drawn it wrong, or it's too bold, and you can never take that back. Whereas if you just draw in a couple of lines, often enough, that's enough to suggest to the eye what's actually going on. So I'm going to get the beard in with some hatching. The corner of the mouth. So the corner of the mouth, when you look straight on, lines up with the pupil normally, just as a rough idea, different for everyone of course. When you're looking to the side, you just got to measure it a bit better. Okay, that'll do. So let's go over to Alpaca. Start with the nose. And then just going to leave that where it interfaces with my hand. And these little squares and things are just showing the texture of the fur that's going on. Got the eye in here. Just adding these little sort of geometric shapes, show what's going on. Happy with that ear shape, so we can pop that in. And the other little ear popping up. Okay. And now we just pop the neck in, remembering that we measured about where the back should come earlier. And they get really fluffy tummies again, like we do with like when there's sand or there's rocks, we add in textural lines with our pen. What's what I sort of choose to do. Do the same with the fur and things, just to show that what's going on. And then we try and pop the hand in as best we can. Again, just keeping those lines nice and loose. will do. And we just pop in some of these background lines. See how it looks if we take a rubber to everything. There's our little properly background fence. And then I'll show you my next sort of stage of the process. Yeah, these trees are a good decision. You can see how much context they add. If you weren't already clear that this is some kind of farm or whatever. There's a bit of a hill there. Okay, so bear with me as I just rub out some of those lines. I always use a putty eraser for this kind of thing. Just going to leave the horizon lines for a second because I've only just penned them in. It should be okay now. Yep. So, suddenly everything looks really simple now that we've removed all the pencil. And there's plenty of room to bring out some bolder lines, bring things forward. So I'm going to use a 0.8 Still Stadler. And let's see what happens if we just start emphasizing a few of our lines. Still bringing out those shapes, especially the key ones which are showing shadow. And then again, we can still change at this stage some of our lines because we're coming in really bold. So I'm going to extend the top of my head, for example. And then I can make the ear much clearer. So because we went in with a lighter pen first, coming in bolder, nothing's permanent. Well, it is literally permanent, but the decision hasn't fully been made. And then again with this nose, you can see now the pencil gone. It needs a little bit of a change. That's better. Same with the mouth, and that's better. And then if we just get the beard in, and I think adding these geometric shapes to the beard and extending it up a bit, and suddenly it's much more obviously a beard. And then also just a few lines in the face to show where shadow and things might be. On the side of the nose. Okay. And again, it's not a portrait, it's a sketch of a person. Happens to be me, so I can't really be offended by what I choose to make myself look like. I promise not to be offended if anyone else chooses to do this as well. And like with buildings and things, just as we get further away, less and less detail. The detail's all in this area, that's a sort of focal point of what's going on. And we can do the same with our alpaca. Pop in his mouth now that we've got our references in, our reference lines, our initial lines. This ear can come out. Where we like our textural lines, we can make them bolder. Where we're not so sure about them, we can sort of just leave them as they were. I think that's looking okay so far. Now, I don't want to overemphasize some of these background features, so I'm going to go back to my narrower pen, my 0.3. And just make them a bit more 3D. And add in some of these other lines as well. And then we'll get in some of there's lots of daisies and I think buttercups and whatnot on the ground. So just similar principles to normal, little linking lines here and there. It's fun to have where there's something meeting the ground, just to link it in with everything else. So put daisies around the bottom of there, and then in this field some other textural lines. We're not going to see the daisies, but we can just add lines which show there's something going on. It's not just a blank space. And then we can add a few, just in the closer area, a few of these sort of, are they daisies, are they whatever's going on. Okay, I would say that's our sketch done. Now, here's the challenge. How do you colour this in? I have a sketching palette which is designed to granulate, to produce fun effects and shapes in a urban / semi-rural scene. It's definitely not a palette filled with colours appropriate for skin tones. So how do we marry that up with a sketch of a person? Well, we enjoy it. We do what we want. We don't stress too much about not having the exact right colours. We just have a play with what we do have. So I've got a hands are yellow. I'm going to start with the hair and the fur. Hands are yellow, and a lunar earth. So lunar earth is one of my really heavily granulating colours. I think if we just mix them, we'll get a sort of light colour, and that is looking to me like a good colour to start with the fur. I'm going to start away from his hat and just apply a really, like almost a glaze. So this is, you see how light this is, just a really light touch, and I'm not going to fill all of him in. And having seen what that looks like, I can take a bit more neat lunar earth and just apply it to his sort of fluffy hat. And then we know, yeah, that's all right. So we don't have it necessarily a palette which is suited to this exact application, but we can make do by playing with the colours we do have. Just dropping in bits to create sort of variation while it's still wet. So this is what I tend to do with people and animals when I don't have a proper palette. And I'm not super confident, even if I did have a proper palette, at mixing skin tones and things like that. So I prefer to do things in I don't know how to describe it, enjoyable, relaxed, maybe slightly abstract way. And make things really bright or colourful, leave lots blank and to the imagination. Pick areas of hair and things to colour in. So like here, still going to play with this lunar earth, this time with a bit of quinacridone, a bit of lunar earth for the beard. I tend to use these shapes as well to guide where I might leave blank or indeed make dark. So this shape here I can make dark, this one dark, that one light, this one blank. This is already light, but if we pop this triangle dark, and here, you get the idea. So we're just picking areas. We've already made these shapes to show texture, and we just bring them forward. Now we'll pop a bit of lunar black for the nose. And I think I've left this light, but actually, in reality, this area is very much in shadow. So if we just bring that in, and if we make sure our edges are soft, things merging together, we end up with quite an interesting image. It's also definitely in shadow under his hat. If someone knows what you would really call that, the sort of fluffy bit at the top, does it have a proper name? I hope not to be offending an alpaca lover by calling it a hat repeatedly. Okay, and then we just make this darker again and bring out some shadow in the back leg and leave the front leg white, and we've got shape and colour, and it's interesting. Now, where else does our Toby want to be a bit colourful? Well, it's always good to keep playing with some of the same colours, and I am wearing black shorts, so let's have some black shorts. So just blocking that in really. And then my back leg just sticks out in front. So if I make that darker, again, that's just showing that there's shape. And also around where there's a pocket and a fold, we add in a bit more pigment and let it move around. And the shoes can always just have a bit of shade, showing there's something different. Now we should do some bits of green, I feel, before, I'm going to leave me alone for a little bit and just see what turns out. I'm going to pop a sort of vivid green I've got here. This is Cascade Green. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it actually. I think let's start in the foreground and just pop a little glaze in. So I'm trying to sort of slightly scrub the brush so that it doesn't leave, I don't want brush strokes per se. And again, we can base some of our colour around these shapes we added earlier. And I think that looks right. So if I just bring out the horizon line with that colour as well. And I'm going to pop it in the trees. But also in the trees, drop some of this lunar black because the trees are sort of silhouetted. Just little touches. Just moving the colour around. I'm going to pop a bit more green down here to smooth the transition from that and let it just drop down. And just gentle touches here and there. So it's all looking a bit grey, so maybe I've got some sap green as well, which might just bring things another dimension, just adding it into the edges, letting it do its thing. As we come forward, I'm trying to make the colours a bit more vivid, more higher intensity, more higher value. That's one way of just showing your foreground as your foreground, as well as the scale and where it sits in the image, having it bolder colours. Okay, and as that dries, we can then add in our daisy colours. So we got daisy, daisy, just lots of dots of yellow. And if we add some splashes here as well, and I want some of these splashes to overlap our alpaca and my legs and up here as well. Again, just all this is adding sort of bits of interest. So what's missing? Well, let's have a think. I do think we could add something into the sky, couldn't we? So normally I do sky first, but when sketching people and being a bit experimental with colours, I'd quite like leaving big blocks of colour until I know that they'll look good or that the image can take it. This is just a standard cobalt blue. I think you can go quite intense with this. Obviously I've popped a lot of water in, so the water will help the colour just move around. And if we fairly carefully draw around my face, and around the top of my head, and this just will provide a bit of contrast, which will help, again, just show that there's more than, well, just it pushes stuff forward. If there's a big contrast between two surfaces, like a blue and a sky and a yellow head, pushes that head forward. So that's a first layer of colour done, I guess. As we let it dry, we'll see what can take more, what needs more, and we can start adding new things in based on that. So you can see these lunar colours I'm using. They are incredibly granulating. They provide these fantastic textures, but they don't leave a flat sort of surface of colour. So even though there's quite a lot of pigment here, because it's granulated, it's got a really lovely texture, but not a huge amount of just basic colour. So I might just come in, this is burnt umber, and bring some burnt umber and some of that yellow and mix them, and just add that on top of our interesting textures. A bit more, think of the umber, just so we get a bit more intensity of colour. Almost, oh, that's the wrong one, that's the lunar earth. A bit more of the burnt umber is what I was aiming for, down here. And just simple touches like that, I think, bring it forward quite a lot. We can pop some yellow in the front for his head. We'll stick with the lunar black for the ears and the nose. And the face is already quite a light grey, but perhaps a tiny bit of the umber mixed with our lunar black, just to make it slightly warm. I think that's enough, isn't it? I like a little bit in that shape as well. Now the same can probably be said for the hair. We just make this really bold yellow. I'm actually going to go in with some more lunar earth and leave some areas as they were, nice and light, and then just add some splashes. And then if I clean off my brush, I've got a bit of tissue here, I can just bring some of these splashes to connect with my head, and just is another interesting effect. And we can do a similar thing with the beard. Okay, I think it'd be a good idea to get some more shape to me. So I'm going to use the lunar black as our de facto shadow colour for today, and just get some of these areas of shadow in. That's under my running away hairline, around the eyes, in the crevice of the nose, then under the beard in the neck. And we can do the same with my hand, so underneath all of here will be dark. And you just wash that up. And we've already got some blue in, so I can bring out some of the blue tones of my jumper. But also continue with the idea of this lunar black in other places. Again, just showing light and dark and shadow and shape. Drop in some more cobalt, even more cobalt in places. A bit at the front here. And even at the back we can take some. That's going to move around and do its own thing. Going to add in a little bit more of our lunar black in areas of darker shadow. It's all wet, so I'm just touching and moving it gently. I'm trying to promote it doing something interesting rather than totally controlling what it will do. And in the background I've got my phone, so let's just make that clear. And then finally a bit of shape to the back of my legs. Again, just areas of shadow. So it's sort of coming forwards gradually, I would say. Now you can see this cascade green has sort of settled a lot, and the colours become a lot calmer, a lot more in the background. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix some more cascade green with some of the burnt umber. So things like burnt sienna, burnt umber are great ways of just dulling down vivid greens. And I just want to bring out areas with a little bit more colour. Pick a bit more of that burnt umber. So I think that looks better. And then we can use it in spots and dribs and drabs. I just added some water to my brush to soften some of those edges. And then do the same again. Making these areas of colour bigger as we come forward. And it just helps with the perspective as well, having these horizontal lines. And then more and more intense as we come even further forward. Just filling in some of these shapes. Going to pick up some umber and just mix on the page. And then a bit of the sap green can come in again. Now I'm going to use it to get these leaves. So we got little spots of yellow and little spot with little patches of green. Perhaps some ideas of grass as well. It's just little shapes. I'm just taking sort of inspiration from the photo rather than obviously directly copying it. We're just looking at what shapes are there, what kind of things are going on, how can we use our colours to give that idea, that essence. So just getting closer and closer, getting bigger and bigger shapes. I should say the brush I'm using, by the way, is an Etcher size 6, I believe. Yeah, size 6. Excellent for its maintaining its point. It doesn't carry a huge amount of water, but it is a synthetic brush. But it definitely has a really good point on it. I got given it by them, I should say, as well, as a gift for doing a demo with them. But that hasn't influenced in any way how much I use it. I tend not to use it, but when I do use it, I'm always amazed by how much the point works. All right, I would just like to add, I think, one more thing, which is some touches of colour on my skin. I think that will actually, I wasn't sure if that was going to be necessary, but I think it actually will. It just shows a little bit of humanity. So just sticking really gently with the same kind of colours we've been using, just to make sure I don't overdo anything. And then I think we can add patches in our alpaca as well, of intense colour. So this is all with the lunar earth. Just some little patches. And then soften some of those shapes. If you don't have I'm using lots of funny colours at the moment because I'm just deciding I'm going to make myself a heavily granulating palette and just see what I can do with it. If you don't have these colours, I'll put in the description at the bottom the sort of equivalent normal colours like burnt umber, burnt sienna, cobalt, and ultramarine, whatever, you know. So I will make it easy to do similar things, but with a more standard palette. But I also love experimenting, and if you want to experiment and you enjoy the colours that I've been using, or you just want to talk to yourself like I do sometimes and find that new stuff's really hard to use, then go for it. All I'm doing now is just adding some splashes and variations, and I love doing stuff like this. So gently, a little bit of greens. And perhaps a last touch of blue there and in the top of the sky. Just finding areas which look a bit bland and filling them. Like here now looks really interesting. Here was a bit empty. Now there's stuff behind my head just softens and makes it interesting by having some splashes and things. Alright, so there is an urban sketch of me and Alpaca, or a rural sketch I suppose, using some fun colours, pencil to start with, just thinking a little bit about what shapes make someone up, what shapes make an animal up. To me, this is definitely a human. There's nothing which looks incredibly wrong. I think people who know me would recognise it as me. I think obviously it's not a perfect likeness. Again, with the alpaca, I don't think anyone's going to think it's something crazily different like a camel or a dog. And all we did, I can't say I've ever drawn an alpaca before actually, but all we did was focus on the shapes and the proportions and use simple measurements. Where does the chin end? Where does the back begin? And by looking at those little reference points and then adding in some fun colours, we get quite a cool little image. So that was my sort of sketching animals and people, and utilising a totally inappropriate palette, but with a good fun effect. If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe. It's a real help to my channel to have a few more subscribers. And please do comment and let me know what you think of this, style or the colours or whatever. Or if you have any feedback on things you think I should do differently or whatever, it's also really greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching.